Hey there, welcome to part 3 of our video series, Christianity is True. Today we're wrestling with the question whether we can show that God exists based on the evidence. So we want to look at that information today and make a case that God does exist and God is real. Before we get to the information, just a reminder that we want to use apologetics as a tool, not as a weapon. We need to recognize that this is used to encourage the believer to strengthen not only their testimony but their faith. And especially with our information today, we want to make sure we follow the evidence where it leads. We don't want to come in with preconceived ideas or presuppositions, but we really want to let the evidence leave, making sure that we validate our statements all the time, backing them up with evidence and reason, and then asking those who push back against us to validate their reasons. And finally, we need to recognize in a manner of humility that we will never answer all the questions. The Bible calls us to faith, but it never calls us to blind faith. We talked about in order to show that Christianity is necessarily true, there are 4 things we must accomplish. We must show that truth is knowable, God is real, the New Testament is reliable, and that Jesus Christ is God. Now, in our last video, we demonstrated that truth is knowable and that truth is undeniable. In order to deny truth, you have to make a truth, therefore causing you to make a self-refuting statement. Today, we're going to look at the evidence for why we think God is real. Now, in this argument, more than any other, we need to recognize that apologetics is a lot like a crime scene and that we have to use evidence that's left behind to make conclusions. No one was there to see the formation of the earth, the creation of it, or the evolution of it. So we don't have anybody that can testify. What we have to do is we have to look at the evidence left behind and we have to make interpretations and we have to make assumptions about what happened. I do believe that there's evidence to show that the universe was created by God, but we need to make sure we look at that evidence in an honest manner. Now, I don't know how many of you saw the movie God's Not Dead. It came out in March of 2014. But in this movie, they make 3 arguments to show that it is rational to believe that God exists. And so in this next few minutes, I want to just real succinctly give the arguments. Somebody ever ask you, why do you believe that God exists? I think the simplest way to answer this is to say that I think that our God is big and that He is the best explanation for the beginning, intelligence, and goodness. And I think this is the most succinct way for us to answer the question why we believe that God exists. I believe that God is the best explanation for the beginning of everything. We know that something had to be eternal. If something wasn't eternal, it means that it was created. And then we get this infinite regressive going backwards. So you have the chicken and the egg illustration. Chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg. I think that it is most logical and most likely that there was a uncreated being who created all of this. In addition to this, I think that the best explanation for intelligent, I think God is the best explanation. This is what we call the watchmaker illustration. This analogy states that if a person were to find a finely tuned watch in the middle of the woods, they would assume a designer and not random chance. And yet when we look at the creation of the universe, a lot of people think it's just random luck or random chance, which that is possible, but it seems rather unlikely. This is what we call an anthropic principle, and it's a principle that states that the conditions of the universe need to be precisely set for the emergence and the sustenance of human life. Now, I know that's a lot. Let me just break that down for you. Basically, there are 122 constants present in the universe right now. If even one of these was missing, life on Earth would not be possible. And so what are some of those constants? Well, we live in the right type of galaxy, right location, right type of star, right relationship, surrounding planets for protection, right type of moon, right type of planet, correct oxygen levels. And it is possible that we just got lucky, but it would seem more likely that this was perfectly designed for our life sustainability. Just like if we saw a watch in the woods, we would assume somebody created it. When you see a very finely tuned universe, we would assume that it was created. Finally, we would say that God is the best explanation for goodness and for morality. Without a supreme being, there are no absolutes, and everything is just a matter of opinion. Absolute moral judgments would be impossible. All of us know instinctively, internally, that the Holocaust was a terrible thing, and we would just assume that others would believe that. But if there is not a supreme being outside of you and outside of me, if there's not a reference point, then people could just say, well, that's just your opinion. But we know that that's not just our opinion. We know there's things that are morally wrong, like rape and genocide and murder. And we know that there's a standard outside of you and I. Norm Geisler said it this way: unless there is a standard beyond Hitler and Mother Teresa, then no one is really right or wrong. So the next time you run into somebody and they push back or they say, do you really believe that God exists? Just remember this acronym BIG. God is the best explanation for the beginning, intelligent, and goodness.